Well, we're only 14 days into the new year, and one of my labor market predictions is already proving to be incorrect, and it's an unfortunate one because it means that there's an uptick in layoffs. Now, if you recall my previous video where I announced what I thought the trends would be for the coming year, one of the things that I predicted was that we would see a decrease in the overall amount of layoffs, and that's because there's some trending lines that show that layoffs are below the historical levels and they're continuing to trend downward. But it doesn't feel that way for the average job seeker, especially if you're somebody that has gotten caught in not one, but maybe even 2 or 3 layoffs in the last 3 years. So seeing this sudden and unexpected wave of layoffs can be disconcerting for the average job seeker. And it caught me off guard as well. And I want to take a look at some of the headlines together with you so we can see what exactly is going on, who's laying off, and maybe look at some of the data behind it. So the reason why I predicted that we would have a lower level of layoffs over the coming year is that the trend line is actually showing that layoffs are below historic levels. And the unemployment rate is showing a relatively healthy 3.7%. Now, I have my own opinion on the unemployment rate. I think that the number is relatively skewed because there are a lot of underemployed people or people who accepted part-time or seasonal jobs, and that impacts the employment rate. In addition to that, we've seen job cuts slowing as we entered into December. So the trend line has been going down in a positive direction. I predicted that we would see a lot of companies reduce their headcount, not hire quite as many people, but through attrition. So in other words, somebody quits their job, the company doesn't backfill the role, and that's how they shrink their workforce, but not necessarily through forced layoffs. But here we hit the first of the year. It seems like all these companies are suddenly announcing these. That's not just even small layoffs. Some of these companies are doing massive layoffs. So obviously piqued my attention, and I'm sitting there thinking like, man, it seems so far I'm proving to be pretty wrong on this one. And I hope that this is one that I'm not going to continue to be proven wrong on, that the trend will reverse and we'll kind of get back to what I originally thought had happened. But nonetheless, it does look like the layoffs are coming in fairly fierce for the beginning part of this year, which is disconcerting. So the first one we have is Universal Music Group, which is laying off hundreds of jobs this year, primarily in their recording division, so the music division. Probably here in Nashville, we're going to see some of these layoffs hit, and that'll go through the first quarter of this year. I don't know specifically what roles are going to be hit inside of the recording music division, but it looks like there's going to be several hundred that will be caught up in this one. Then we got Citigroup, who has announced a major layoff. So it says here that Citibank is planning to lay off 20,000 employees, which equates to about 10% of its workforce in the next 2 years, as it comes off one of its worst financial quarters in more than a decade. So I don't know if that's a sign of bigger things to come and where that is necessarily coming from. And I'm wondering if this is going to hit some other financial institutions as well. So we'll pay close attention to what's going on in the financial services segment. Additionally, we also have NBC, which is doing a relatively small layoff, 50 to 100 workers. That's in their news division, it looks like. And then Disney's Pixar is poised to reduce headcount by as much as 20% this year, which may include staff hired for Disney Plus. So that's Disney's had quite a few layoffs already, and it continues to struggle. Then we've also got Discord, which is cutting 17% of its employees. I actually use Discord a lot myself, but that equates to about 170 people in order to sharpen its focus. And this is kind of a continuation of what we're seeing in the tech cuts that we've seen so drastically over the last 18 months or so. Then, of course, Google, we talked about them in another video, but they're also going to be reorganizing their devices and services team and laying off a few hundred roles. So this is it looks like the second layoff that Google has announced. And the previous video, we talked about how they're looking at AI, and it looks like they're continuing to look at other roles. Now, Google is a massive corporation with tons of people. A few hundred roles is relatively small, but again, this is coming on top of their other announcement that they're going to be laying off thousands of roles due to an increase in their reliance or usage of the AI services that they have. Amazon is also letting go of hundreds of people in their Prime Video and some MGM Studio workers. So that's as well as 5% of their Audible staff. So that's another big layoff by Amazon. So these are the same companies that we see doing round after round of layoffs, and they just continue to keep on hitting. BlackRock is laying off 3% of their global workforce, or roughly 600. So we've got probably the biggest financial services company of them all is also laying off additional 3% of their workforce. It makes you kind of wonder, all right in the economy. There's been a lot of talk, and I don't like to speculate on whether or not we're going to hit a recession or not, but there's been a lot of talk about recession in 2024 with all the kind of financial indicators pointing toward it. But it doesn't help that you're seeing BlackRock and Citigroup announcing these layoffs at the very beginning of the year. Then we have the National Football League, who is offering buyouts to 200 of its 1,100 person staff, and this is going to be just ahead of the layoffs. Let's take a look at this headline, see if we can learn anything here. It looks like this is going to be a lot of front office. Wasn't clear how many of the buyouts they aim to achieve. Obviously, if you don't accept the buyout, they don't get the numbers that they need in the buyouts, then they will move those over to layoffs. And I don't know if there's going to be layoffs in addition to that. I'm just kind of scrolling through here really quickly. Yeah, it says it wasn't immediately clear how many buyouts the NFL is aiming for and whether or not they would go beyond that to do reductions in force. And just a little side note on buyouts: if you're ever offered a buyout, it may be in your best interest to take one while you can, especially if it's more lucrative than what would be available through a severance. And generally they are. They try to incentivize people to take them so they don't have to go through that process. But it might be in your best interest to take at least a close look at it, because if they come knocking and offer it to you and you turn it down, then you can expect them to be looking at your job for a reduction in force anyway. So take a look at it and see how it compares. So let's see what else we have. Unity Services is letting go of 1,800 people, which is a 25% reduction in their workforce. I'm not actually familiar with Unity Services, but that's a pretty massive cut if you work at Unity. Looks like they will be doing or 1,800 jobs. An internal memo. This is a San Francisco, this San Francisco-based company's largest layoff ever, and they're expected to be completed by the end of March. So this is looks like, okay, the maker of Pokemon and Hearthstone, so video games. So that's a pretty deep cut by them. So we're continuing to see tech-related companies going through pretty massive layoffs. Duolingo we talked about on a previous video, so I won't cover that one here. So we also have Sharpie and Rubbermaid producer Newell Brands announcing that they're having a 7% cut of their front office roles, and that will take place in the first quarter of the year as well. And then there is a Video Amp, which is laying off 20% of its workforce. It looks like CEO has also stepped down. We mentioned in a previous video that Xerox also plans to lay off 15% of their workforce as a transformation under new leadership. So they're kind of looking at Xerox as kind of a legacy company, has been going through a lot of issues. So this is not necessarily unexpected, but the 15% is a pretty massive cut. If you're working at one of the legacy companies, you want to just take a look at your industry and see what's going on. There's also a few other smaller companies, like some startups and that sort of thing. And keeping in line with tech, Twitch is also laying off 500 employees, which represents 35% of their staff. So unfortunately, we're seeing a fairly sizable uptick in the number of companies who are announcing layoffs in the first 2 weeks of the new year. Again, going right against my prediction that we wouldn't see this many. So I'm not sure if this is going to be an ongoing trend or if this is just a temporary blip. They were waiting for the first of the year before they would start to announce layoffs, and then things will kind of simmer down, and hopefully it's the latter. So if you're somebody that is in an industry like financial services, certainly in tech and some other high-risk organizations, read the tea leaves, look around your organization, see if there are any signs of chatter about things not going so great. If you're in cost-cutting measures, that you lost your biggest customers or they're pulling back, be in front of this thing. Don't think that it can't happen to you, that you've survived 2 or 3 rounds of layoffs previously, because it's very clear some of these companies are still going into, I think like Amazon's probably on layer 4 or 5 at this point. Same with Google. We're seeing companies continuing to look at their staff and trying to figure out what the right size is for them. But it doesn't mean that you can't get hired in a market like this. I am seeing an uptick in people who are announcing that they've laid off. I think today I scrolled on my LinkedIn and I saw at least 3 or 4 people that were first round connections of mine that ended up announcing that they landed a new job. So that's good to see. People are still getting hired. You just have to put your best foot forward and just be consistent. But if you're somebody that's working, take a look around your organization. Now's the time that you want to be preparing, not when they announce it and you're being pulled into an office and having an envelope slid across the desk at you. Anyway, just wanted to give a quick update here. I will keep my ear to the pulse of what's going on in the job market. So if you're interested in more videos just like this and want to know what's going on in the labor market, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And of course, I'm here to help you get back into the workforce as quickly as you can. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.